Hi everyone, this is Shan. In this video, I will show you how you can create a tweet bot using Python for your Twitter account. Through a tweet bot, you can create an automated tweet service to your account. Today, we'll be taking the Fantasy Premier League API and create a service which can post the top 5 players with the best points per million stat. To do so, we'll be using Python as our programming language. Tweepy is a Python library which we would be using to send the tweets. And the Python will be using the Fantasy Premier League API to get the player data and calculate the top 5 players with the best PPM. So we need a Twitter account which would be used to send the tweets, a Twitter developer account which is used to connect Python to Twitter through Twitter API, and then the basic understanding and setup of Python. This is a Twitter account which I run. It's called FPL Arena. I have some automated services like price changes and stats, which I run through this account. So we would be learning how to do that. This is the Twitter developer portal where you would be using your Twitter account and create keys and tokens, which we would then use in the Python program later. So you need to copy your access keys and tokens from here and then use it in the Python function next. So let's move on to our Python function, and to do so we would be first creating a folder in your laptop and name it FPL code or anything which you like. Now after you create that folder, we'll create a file called pip file inside that folder. This pip file will store all the packages and dependency for the Python program. So we would then write them here, saying Tweepy is our first package which we'll be using for connecting with the Twitter API, and then we would be using Pandas to manipulate and create the data we need, and the last one is the requests, which would then be used for accessing the Fantasy Premier League API. So once this is done, next file we would create is the Python, which will hold the Python function. So I'll name it ppm.py, and then we would start writing our Python ppm code. This file would hold all the information which is required for the tweetbot to run. So we go ahead, import our libraries, Tweepy, and the last one would be Pandas. Speedy. I like to do things with handler, so I would create a ppm bot handler as a function, Python function, and write all the code inside this rather than creating it directly in the main function. So we would write all our codes inside the ppm bot. And the first thing we need to do is we need to get the consumer keys and access tokens used for Tweepy. So we would get them from the Twitter developer portal as we saw earlier. And so the first step, as I said, which would be the consumer keys and access tokens. So we would define them, which would then be used for Tweepy. Now, once you've got your tokens saved on your desktop, you need to line them up and put them in a variable like this. So we would have consumer key, consumer secret, access key, and access secret. This is used to access your Twitter account. Do not make this key and secret public, because this is your private Twitter account handling keys and secret. I would be regenerating mine after this video, so that this is only for the demonstration purposes. So after this, we would then write some code to authenticate the Twitter with these keys. So we would then write an auth function for OAuth handler, which would then use the consumer key and secret, and we set up the access token via the key and secret. Now, Tweepy function can then authenticate your Twitter account and then create an API function around that. So this completes our integration with Twitter via Tweepy. The next step we would want is to access the Fantasy Premier League API. So I would then, what I do is create an element port URL, which is the Fantasy Premier League API URL, which I'll be using here. So that's the API URL. To use the request function to access the URL, so requests dot get element URL would then access and get the JSON and put that in the request here. Now the next thing is to access the actual JSON. You would need to write request.json, which would then get the final JSON into this FPL data variable. Just to show you how this API is designed, we would put in this API in the browser and see this API returns a JSON structure. Now, obviously this JSON structure cannot be read as it is. So what I typically do is I use an online JSON formatter, and I would then copy this whole text and put them in this here and copy it. You would see that this JSON is designed with different elements. So it has got events, game settings, phases, teams, total players who play Fantasy Premier League, elements, stats, and types. What we are interested in today is the elements function. You can see that 623 Premier League players data is there in this tag. So when you open this tag, you would see that each of the players have their own data set, which gives out the first name, the cost of the player, how many he's been selected by, then transfers, total points, etc. So all these variables can be found for that element or the player, and this is what we would be needing to access our code. So we access the JSON, and then we get, next step is to get the total points. So what we do is, for that we create an elements data frame. A data frame is a frame created by Pandas. So if you want to learn more about that, you would need to learn more about Pandas and Python, how it is used. It is something which we need to manipulate or create our own data set and clean the data. So we create a data frame and we define it like this. Now FPL data holds our JSON, so FPL data of elements would give us the elements section of the JSON. So that's what we want to access on. Now elements df, what we do is we don't want all the variables in that in the data frame. So what we do is we shorten the data frame by picking up only certain columns we need. So we need the web name, which is the player name. We need the now cost, which is the cost or the value of the player, and we need the total points. Now once we have these three columns, what we can do is we can calculate the ppm. But before that, we would need to manipulate and create a proper cost. Now the cost which is saved as is not how it is shown on the website. So you need to divide the cost by 10 to get the actual value. So if the cost of the player is 10, the site would give you 100, for example. So you would need to divide that by 10 so that you get the actual cost. And then the next step is to calculate the ppm. The formula for ppm is the total points gathered by the player divided by the cost. So now we have these two columns in our data frame. So what we can do is we just need to divide these two and get the ppm. So I'll create another column in the data frame, a new column which I would name as ppm, and I would then use the total points and divide that by the cost, which would then give us the ppm, and this column here would store the ppm. Now the next thing we need to do here is get the top 5 players ppm. So get the top 5 ppm can be fetched by using the sort values and head function in the pandas data frame. So what we do is we define another data frame and then use elements df, sort the values according to the ppm column, and then we say ascending equal to false, which would then give us the top ppm values, and then head of 5 gives us the top 5 of that data frame. So now we have the data ready, and in our ppmdf, what you can do while you're doing this is use the debug function to actually see if the data is coming out correctly. So I'll just write my main function here, main, and call my ppm bot. Now we can act. So how you can use your debug function is you create for example, if I want to print it, you create a breakpoint at the point you want to put and check the value. So I would then use run and debug here, and then that would then give us this ppmdf, and you can see all these elements have been accessed here. So once I step over, I can then see the ppmdf getting created. So if you want to see the value of players, and then so you can see here the top 5 players and top 5 ppm have got generated. So I know Gallagher, James, Olivera, Cancelo and McCarthy are the top 5 players who are the best ppm for the game so far, and these are the total points. Now the next step for us to do is to actually tweet it via an automated tweet function. So I'll stop this and create a tweet. So I'll create and send tweet. In this, first thing we would do is we create a list of the ppm players. So I'll create a blank list here, and I'll loop through the data frame we created here. So I'd use the iter rows function. So in ppmdf dot iter rows, this lets me access the names and the ppm value one by one. So I can go and access the name and put it in a variable called name, which is this, and then I go and check the ppm value. So ppm value would is stored at the ppmdf dot at I comma ppm column. Now ppm value, if you see here, has a lot of decimal characters. So what I could do is round off ppm value by 2 so that I don't get a big figure. And the next thing I would do then is create a ppm string and join these two for the tweet. So what I'm doing here is I'm joining name, and then I am giving the ppm value after that. So I'd go ppm value and make it as a string because it's a float right now. So I'll do that, and then I would append this into the list. So I can do this to append that to the list. So this has given me a list of, and this every time it iterates, it adds to the list. Now the next thing I want to do is the whole list I just want to put as a string and put a line break against each line. So I just check the length. If the list has something in it, then what we do is we make a join string and we put a line break after each value. So this would then create a join string, and this will give you the players and the ppm values in each line. So the next thing is to actually wrap it around, a final tweet kind of variable, which would then be something around, we show top 5 ppm players, and then we may put some line breaks after that, show this ppm join string, which would then give out all the players' names, and in the end we can add a hashtag, say FPL and FPL community. Our tweet is now created. So this variable will hold our final tweet, and now we would just call api.update tweet. The API is the variable which you use for Tweepy here, authenticated, and api.update_status, and then send the ppm final tweet, right? Now this code here is ready to actually run and send the tweet. So what we would do is we'll check the tweet against the Twitter handle. So once I run this, I would then get the tweet live on my Twitter account. So I'm just pinging the Twitter account as well next to it. So this is my Twitter account here, which my last tweet is on the price fall 6 hours ago. And once I run this, I should get the tweet of top 5 ppm players. So let's try and run this and see if it works. So I go here and run the Python file. When I play this, so that Python file is run, it's done. What I need to do is go back to my Twitter handle, refresh and see if the Twitter handle got the tweet. And yes, there you go. So I got top 5 ppm, Gallagher, James, Livramento, Cancelo and McCarthy, and you got the hashtags below that. So as you see here, every time there's an update in the Twitter API, FPL API, you can just run this and tweet, and then it'll get an automatic tweet generated for you on your Twitter account. That's pretty much from me. I hope this video helped you guys to understand how you can send a tweet, automated tweet. All this code is also available in the GitHub link shared in this video. Thank you for watching and cheers.